2 cents on skill development and data science and intellectual property rights for entrepreneurs. So we have experts with us, Mr. Srinivasan from KPMG, Mr. Anand from Verizon, Mr. Dr. Nithyananda from Trichy. So without wasting further time, I would like to ask a couple of questions on skill development to Mr. Srinivasan. So being an entrepreneur, I have faced a couple of problems. Like I was not an expert in all fields when I was starting up. I lacked. So I was not an expert in all the fields which is required in starting a business. So I lacked a couple of skills, and I had to work in a team as well with different skill sets. So there were definitely trust issues because I didn't know what they were doing. So amidst these thoughts, what are the thoughts? How should an entrepreneur go about it in managing his team with different skill sets where he doesn't have any knowledge in that? And moreover, he is also bound to learn these skill sets in parallel to focusing upon his core business. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So, an entrepreneur is no different from any other professional. So, as a typical professional, whether you work on a job or you work for an organization or you work for your own organization, you solve problems. You identify opportunities in the market and you solve problems. So, the difference for an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur, he or she writes their own job description. So, they decide what needs to be done. Whereas, if you're working for an organization, the agenda is set typically by the organization, by the superior to whom you are working with. So in this context, based on some of my experience, what the typical view of an entrepreneur is that an inside out view, saying that this is what I need to do, without too much of an outside perspective. So the first thing an entrepreneur needs to develop is that what is the context in which he or she operates? How can I take the technical skill sets which I have and along with it package some of the non-technical skill sets which I need to build? So that could be in areas of interpersonal relationships. So you mentioned about working with team members. So an entrepreneur should be able enough to say that I have a few strengths, but I also need people around me. Say, for example, one of the areas where an entrepreneur really lacks in India is financial skill sets. They may be technical, they may write a lot of good code, but when it comes to looking at a balance sheet or analyzing the bank account, they find that it is very difficult for them to do. And in that context, they should be open enough to say that they will work with another person, and that person can bring in the complementary skill set. The other point is that when you are looking at solving problems, the where you started from and where you are, as you are going in the journey, you need to be very flexible. So I have seen a few entrepreneurs who hold on to their thoughts saying this is how it should be done. Whereas, the underlying technology might have changed, the underlying ground reality might have changed. So just to answer you directly, the most important thing is to work with people who have complementary skill sets, to recognize that it is not just about technical expertise, to move from the inside out perspective and look at what is happening in the market, to have role models and mentors. These are some of the ways in which an entrepreneur can sustain that journey, because it is very difficult if you don't have that inner confidence in you. And to keep that confidence going and keep that momentum going, you need to have people as role models who can help you sustain that energy levels.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. So that was pretty insightful. My next question would cover data science part, and this question is to Mr. Anand. So, how relevant are data science? What exactly data science covers, and how is it relevant for the early stage startups? Is it beneficial, and any success stories you might like to share for how has it helped any startup grow their business and grow global?
Yeah, thanks Vivek for asking this question. I think, first of all, let me kind of address this fundamental question a lot of people have is, what is data science? I think a lot of people hear this terms like big data, data science, and there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of hype, but a lot of lack of clarity about what exactly it does for both the business and in the academia. The way I understand data science is like data science is the art and science of creating business value from data. The data could be the data which is available in the public domain. The data could be something which is available within the company. But if you're able to create business value through science and art from the data, that is to me data science. So going back to your second question about why is it important for startups and why is it important for entrepreneurs? So if you look around, like all the companies which are starting up, right, whether it be in retail, whether it's be online e-commerce, invariably, if you dig one layer deeper, you will find that their business model, after this initial phase about discounting and customer acquisition and so on and so forth, in the long run is going to heavily rely on analytics and data science. Whether it is the recommendation engines of e-commerce sites, or for example the models like where like a Groupon like company might be using, or I'm just saying a couple of names like the Ubers and the Olas, how they are using traffic modeling to promise service agreements with our customers, saying that you just need to wait X amount of time before you get a cab. All these are going to be based on data-driven decision-making, data-driven modeling, and that is going to sustain them in the future. So the initial buzz which we see about discounting and all these different other techniques of customer acquisitions are going to fade off. The second phase of all these startups invariably is going to happen through a core competency, which is data-driven, data science, backed up competency. And even if you look at traditional companies like retail, startups starting in retail, like sooner or later they have to start relying on analytics to make their decisions. Gone are the times where you could kind of physically observe people and understand what segmentation they belong to, how their behavior is. Now, because the customers don't leave physical footprint, they leave more of digital footprint, and that ends up being the real story for understanding the customers, even for traditional companies like retail, manufacturing, automobiles. Even for them, without a database wrapper for the leadership, it's going to be very difficult for them to succeed. So either way, I think it's important for entrepreneurs to have a sound understanding of data science and be able to make that part of their core business model.
I'll just add something very quickly here. So the traditional way of looking at data used to be that the companies used to say to the customer, these are the products which you want, right? Now with this next wave was actually the customers going back through social media and saying that, this is the product which I want. Can you design something? So you look at an IKEA furniture, or you look at modular phones which are being made by Motorola, etc. Now the next wave is because, to build these efficiencies, this is going to be more collaborative. This is going to be where the customers are going to come through, their several forums, and the companies need to be, the companies which listen the best are the companies which are going to succeed.
Sir, any thoughts on data science part from your perspective?
So data science for me has been from the intellectual property perspective, I'll be speaking about. I see two issues. One is about the privacy of the data, and the second one is about the security of the data. I think this debate is already raging in the context of Aadhaar card. But beyond that, I'm also looking at whatever data that you're providing, have you consented it to be analyzed, broken down, and then interpreted with? That's first question. And second question is, what is going to be the usage, and how are they going to be applying this data again back on you? So these are the two issues that have a legal dimension, and I would be worried about intellectual property with reference to the protection of that. Second one is about data privacy, and the third one is about data security. These are the three concerns which I have. So far in India, neither of these three issues, or none of these three issues, have been addressed efficiently. For instance, if I look at customer data within an organization, there is no proper intellectual property mechanism to safeguard. This becomes a confidential information which has commercial value. There is no trade secret law. With reference to data security and data privacy, there is nothing at all in India. There's something which is covered under constitution, but beyond that, there's a large debate going on, but no concrete solution has come out of it yet. And the data security, there's some provisions, a few provisions in the Information Technology Act, and beyond that, I don't see anything available. So that is why when companies talk about data science, from the legal perspective, I get very scared. You're providing so much of information about your individuality, your physical, your biometrics, the physical data. Then you're also providing your medical data. You're providing your financial transaction data. All of them are in the open, and they are not under any obligation of being protected and safeguarded. So this data might get into the hands of people who have wrong intentions, and that can lead to a lot of legal repercussions. So this is something that I have in mind.
So coming back to IPR, intellectual property rights. First of all, I would like to know how many entrepreneurs are in the house. Okay.
How many entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So how many of you know about the importance of IPR? All of you. Great. So formally, I would like to ask you, in layman terms, could you please explain what is IPR and how is it beneficial for startups, and why are entrepreneurs usually ignoring it in the initial phase and they are not focusing on it? So could you highlight some of your thoughts?
Thank you. First of all, intellectual property rights is being ignored for by entrepreneurs, especially for a simple reason that they don't have any clear idea of what it is, why do we need to look at intellectual property rights, and there are no proper places where they can get this information on. To put it in a simple layman term, intellectual property is anything that is a creation of your mind, intellect. That's where the intellect part comes in. And then you take those creations from the mind and then protect it under the 6 or 7 categories. There are 6 or 7 different kinds of IP rights. You protect it under them. The first one is your patents for your invention, that's technology driven. Second one is your copyrights for your artistic work. For example, you look at this bottle. I just took this for the sake of explanation. This bottle has at least about 4 different IP rights. The technology to purify the water, it is covered under inventions. The design per se is covered under designs, the design of the bottle. Then comes your copyright here, which is the artistic work on the bottle. And then the fourth one is the Diet Aqua, that's the trademark. These are the 4 intellectual properties just on a bottle like this. And if you're running a digital company or a technology based company, there could be at least 3 or 4 more different IP rights. For instance, you could have your confidential information, you could have your trade secrets, okay? You could have your integrated circuit design, you could have your hardware design. All these are protectable under different categories of intellectual property rights. And all of them needs to be protected by an entrepreneur if he has to grow, especially when you're getting into the growth phase of the organization. He needs to have solid protection of this, otherwise it won't be possible to scale it up. Second one is about if till now there has not been this problem, but of late venture capitals, angels are also looking at how strong is your intellectual property rights when they're funding. Why? Because if your venture fails, what is the way out for venture capitalist or angel funding agency to safeguard their investment? They don't have any backup. But if they have some kind of a patent which is strong enough, or some kind of a trademark or a brand which is strong enough, then they can leverage it. They can license it to somebody else, they can sell it to somebody else, and then they can recover at least a small portion of their investment. So these funding agencies are also looking at IP rights, how strong is their IP rights. Then I would like to close, how do you generate wealth out of this IP right? We say protecting it. Beyond what? Beyond that what? If you have to leverage on your IP rights, you just have to look at 2 different models. One is you don't produce, but you license it to somebody else. That's your classical licensing model. The second one is franchising. You're manufacturing it, you've perfected the business system, but you don't want to invest in that business and but then still you want to make money out of your IP rights. So, what your McDonald's does, what your Burger King does, these are all franchising model. They take the IP rights, they combine IP rights into a product, and then they keep licensing it to people who have the money to invest and who have the technology processes to implement it. So this is where I think as entrepreneurs you can look at IP rights per se.
Just a couple of experiences. So the entrepreneurs whom I have interacted with being in management consulting, this is more, the IP you create, which is what Professor spoke about. The IP which you use from others, that is another important thing, because in India, if everything which is available for use just gets used, you may take a page out of a book without any kind of, giving any source or any credit to anybody who's written the book. You may want to take, the stories in the movies possibly. And that is one thing every entrepreneur needs to be aware of, because tomorrow when it comes to a funding situation, when it comes to any legal situation, that is one. Even more fundamentally, there is a challenge amongst entrepreneurs in India where they don't know how to work with contracts. They're very comfortable in the technical spaces, but areas like finance and accounts, areas like contracting, areas like, lot of times I find somebody walks up to me and says, I've got this term sheet. Now we're looking at $1 million, but what should I do? What are these terms favorable for me, or is it not favorable for me? And that is when, there is a basic need for education in terms of the legalese, in terms of how, you could actually get ripped off if you are not aware. So that is something which every entrepreneur in this house should be aware of.
Now that you brought that discussion, we have a very interesting exercise going on at IIM Trichy, where we run this course called Entrepreneurship in Practice. We bring in experts from the industry who are practitioners and also who are entrepreneurs themselves, or who are part of the accelerators or the incubators, and then we keep doing it. In that course, we do this term sheet evaluation. Term sheet evaluation, when I start this discussion, it becomes a huge debate. Sir, what is this problem? What is this clause? If I modify this, what will happen? So we run it, it's supposed to be for about one session of 90 minutes, but it typically goes on for 2 sessions, 3 sessions, because the term sheet is the most critical thing, especially when they've crossed the angels funding stage and they're getting into VC funding stage. It becomes very, very critical, and that is where they don't have any clue whatsoever. One. Second is, we, as part of that, we also see when you're trying to move from being an employee to an entrepreneur, it's called as a transitionary phase. What kind of IP rights, what kind of legal issues should you be aware of? One is, see if the company that you're working with has any NDA, NCA, NSA kind of clauses. NDA is non-disclosure agreement. They've maintained everything as confidential. You're not supposed to be disclosing it outside. NCA is non-compete. You cannot compete in the same business. NSA is non-solicitation. You cannot take your ex-employees or your friends to your new engine. These are the things which are inherently covered in every employment agreement, but they don't realize this. But still they go ahead and start. If the company, ex-company or old company wants to file a case, they have every right, and the probability of their winning is very, very high. So we start from that, as in even at the moonlighting stage or even at the conceptualization stage, till they get into the term sheet phase. We cover the entire thing, and the discussions, the cases, the nuances, the examples that we discuss is amazing. And what I see every time that I run this course is students are not aware. First of all, they don't get to read anything. The media which is coming up with a lot of information about entrepreneurs, they don't cover anything about law. And this is a major challenge, major handicap. And sorry to say this, but even movies are not helping in any way. Because if you look at the movie called on the Facebook, which came out, that really took us through the entire phase of how an entrepreneurial venture grows. Okay, then there are many such movies which take you through the entrepreneurial growth, at least in the Western world. But what does an entrepreneur go through in India? No one has even captured that in the movies. So this is something which is food for thought, probably.
So here we just need one song. Start of the song is poor, end of the song is rich.
Any final comments, Mr. Anand?
Yeah, so I think like the reason also why in India we don't take IPR so seriously is the issue of plagiarism, right? Like that's almost taken in some sense as a business model by itself. And where it affects the most is when there is a theft, like someone takes IPR and starts a new venture. That's how we see the relevance of IPR in the Indian or the Asian ecosystem. Vis-a-vis, like when you compare the US, where every day like large companies are filed with $1 million lawsuits. You see whether it's Apple versus Samsung or any big Fortune 100 company versus another Fortune 100 company, where it's a very legal kind of mindset for IPR, which dominates both the business ecosystem discussion and the discussion in the corporate world. So that I think is a fundamental difference, the way Indian corporates view IPR versus what perhaps an American corporate would.
Great. I have one last question. So there was an article going around around the Red Bull brand. So they had the tagline Red Bull. They had the tagline "You'll get wings," something like that. So there was a file petition by one of the US customer. Someone was there, so he filed that I drank Red Bull, but I didn't get wings. So something was there. So and he won the suit, the case. In fact, that's what I got to hear. So in such scenario, so how should we protect our tagline, or I mean, how should we go about it?
I've heard about this, I've read about this, but incidentally that case happens to be a wrong case. It's a media report which is going on. The issue is when you talk about any product which is being brought out by an entrepreneur, it is comprising of, as I said, at least about 4 to 5 intellectual property rights. And when you're licensing it, when you're communicating it to the consumer, you use what is called as taglines, which is protectable under trademarks. Then your advertisements are covered under copyrights. Plus, when you are advertising, there are these advertisement standards which are provided by the Indian Advertisement Society. So they, ASCI, Advertisement Society of India. So they provide the broad guidelines of what should be contained in advertisements and what is not. There are 2 specific things that every entrepreneur should know. One is about don't make exorbitant claims about your product. Though there is something covered under fundamental rights, there is this case called Tata Power, Tata Telecom versus MTNL, which said advertisement is a fundamental right of a business organization. Fair enough. But having said that, when you're making these statements, you also get protected under salesman's puffery, but not always does salesman's puffery gets protected. Second is, when you're making comparative statements, you're necessarily using somebody else's brand, somebody else's trademark to compare. If it is not verifiable on an objective basis, then you're opening up yourself for lawsuits. So these are 2 very, very important issues. And when you say you get wings, it is not possible. You're opening up yourself for a legal lawsuit. Then second is Shaktiman case was there. Shaktiman, you turn and then you fly. There are cases which are filed in India. Why? Because people thought as soon as they start falling off the building, Shaktiman will come and protect. That was how it was projected, and many people died. So this opens up 2 things. One is about the civil litigation, but also criminal offense. And second, with reference to data protection, probably many of you might remember, Citibank's data was stolen by an ex-employee, and he took it on a CD and tried to sell it to a competitor. He was arrested, and he was primarily caught, arrested, and then he was imprisoned for he was penalized for 2 things. One is about theft of property belonging to an organization. Data is a property, data is an asset, so that is theft of their property is one, for which he was prosecuted criminally. It's a criminal offense. And second one was about committing a civil offense. There's a breach of contract which said you're not going to be disclosing anything. So that is a breach of contract for which you are going to be imposed a penalty. So your intellectual property, it appears to be not even on the bottom of the list of your agenda, but it has significant implications on your venture. And it has got the capability of either allowing your business to grow or getting your business closed right there at the budding stage. So that's something.
Yeah, just one point on cyber security. So a lot of these entrepreneurs are now digital, right? They use websites, they use social media to reach out to, and that comes along with the risk of somebody coming and hacking your website or somebody stealing your data, and a lot of people are not aware of that. A lot of people are not aware, so they give it. Somebody says, "I will maintain your website for 5,000 rupees a month." And the entrepreneur says, yes, that's good. And they give all the data to the person who's maintaining the website, who's typically a freelancer. And after a few, maybe that guy gets greedy, and then he says, I will sell off all the data and, the requisite. Because so much of data gets captured, parameters about your customer and who has bought it and when do they buy. And so this is something which a lot of entrepreneurs need to be aware of. Please have a high standard of vendors whom you interact with. It may be a little costly, but it will help you in the long run. So that's something which I just wanted to share.